I'm Riley Reese. This is the Sophia Unfiltered podcast, where we bring together thought leaders, wellness entrepreneurs, makers, and emerging health leaders. I'm grateful to talk to these brilliant minds and share their powerful stories with you. And I especially love listening to the conversations that are led by my friend and co-host, Lauren Deitch. Lauren is a health coach, a life coach, and a counseling practitioner. She's been part of the Sophia family since the early days. We're here to have raw, unfiltered conversations because sharing your stories has the power to change lives, help others heal, and transform the way we take care of ourselves. I'll let Lauren fill you in on her guest today.
Hello, listeners. Welcome back to another episode of Sophia Unfiltered. Today on the podcast, we have an amazing guest, Jason Clawson. He has such an inspiring story, listeners, and I think that you're really going to resonate with some of the messages and pieces that he has to share with us. He is the co-founder of the company Giving Sunshine. Jason, thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, happy days. I'm happy to be here. This is awesome.
Absolutely. We're so happy to have you. Tell us a little bit about your story.
So the way life has been going for us for a while, this is where I like to start my story, was we felt like life was going pretty good for us. And to paint everybody a picture is like, I was a clinical director of a recovery program. I was a licensed therapist running a program. My wife had just lost 100 pounds. The light was coming back on. The boys were thriving in school. I have 2 boys in school and sports. We were building a house. And we're like, yes, we finally arrived. Like, we could be really happy with the direction we were going and the way life was going. So we were pretty excited about life. And there's probably many of us out there that have that moments where we feel like life's going pretty good. And we feel like we could do this for a while. But many times that doesn't happen to us. Life gets thrown a curveball. And the curveball for us in my family was my wife came to me and says, we have a lump in her stomach that we felt, and says, let's hold on a week and let's see where it has gone in a week. When we come back in a week, and that's where it had grown. And that's where we started to worry and start to get some help through doctors and some tests and some blood work and try to figure things out, because we had to help people and we had to be good in the community and see things are going. So we went through all these series of tests and blood work, and we could never figure out what's going on with my wife. So we found ourselves up at the hospital, and we were having exploratory surgery with my wife to see what was going on. And lo and behold, the doctor does a partial hysterectomy. And that's where the doctor discovered cancer for us. I remember a moment in my life where the doctor comes into the waiting room, looks at me, my wife's family, my sister, her best friend, says, Jason, I'm so sorry, but your wife has stage 4 colon cancer. For many of us, I've had life-altering news that just like stuns you. And for me, I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know how to respond, because I knew I had some boys at home that needed their parents. We were young. We still had a life to live. So I'm just thinking like, okay, how long does she have? How am I going to pay for it? How are we going to work and manage this? And I start to freak out a little bit about how I was going to take on life and how I was going to get through this. So it shocked us. And I remember the doctor went down to the recovery room, and when my wife woke up, my doctor told her the news. We cried and shared some more tears. And again, my brain was just overloaded. It just couldn't stop about how I was going to handle this. So as the doctor left, I just said, I need some answers. And I ran after the doctor down the hallway, and I said, Doctor, I need some answers. This isn't sitting very well with me, and I need some answers. So just rapid questions, whatever came to my mind of what are treatment options, how long does she have? And so just peppering her with questions. And she paused me, and she said a phrase that has ever changed my life, forever. Looks at me and says, Jason, you'll be okay, but cancer has a way enhancing your life. And you don't want to hear something like that, especially from the doctor. Like, No, you're supposed to tell us something different. You're supposed to give us some answers. And I think at that point I became angry and upset and just really frustrated about the life that had just been dealt. And I was like, this isn't fair. Like, how could someone that was trying to do really good in the world and helping people with their hardest issues, it just didn't seem fair. And I was just like, I was mad at God and mad at the situation, and just like my life just crumbled and fell apart. And I just said, what am I going to do? And I just was left like trying to figure out how to pick up the pieces and move along in my life. So going from one spectrum to the next in a short amount of time, and it just left us stunned and trying to figure out where to go.
Absolutely. Well, and it's so relatable too, because like you said, you guys had your best laid plans. You had checked all of the appropriate to-do boxes of success. You know, you found your person, you started a family, you were building a home, you guys had successful careers, you had a successful life, and you had all of these plans for the future. And when a diagnosis comes up as such a curveball, you want answers, you want justification, you want to know all of the what ifs and the whys. And I just think it's so profoundly relatable with our listeners who are currently navigating or working through the aftermath of something like that.
We were told 2 to 3 years to navigate cancer and to figure things out. I didn't know what that meant. I knew we had a short amount of time to be able to figure this out and how to beat cancer. But the difficult part is we did everything we were asked. We did treatment. And every time we went in for a follow-up and to check up, things have never got better. And that's really difficult, where you go through a traumatic event and then you do what you're told and you build yourself up, and then you just crumble again. So it's like a repeated trauma of here's bad news, and then we do really good things, and then we get bad news. So after 9 months of fighting it, we were at the funeral of my wife saying goodbye to her. Funerals are good because everybody rallies around you and everybody brings you energy, and it felt good and supportive. But the hardest part for many people that don't even know that have gone through this is after the aftermath of the funeral and you wake up like the next morning and there's nobody around and you're left all alone. That's when all the emotions start to hit really hard of, okay, how am I going to be this dad? How am I going to work? How am I going to be the hybrid parent, mom and dad? How am I going to provide the emotional needs for my boys? And this heaviness began to just go onto my shoulders. And I just remember just crying in my bed and just saying, I don't want to go to work. I don't want to do this. Again, this is not fair. Like, I don't want to do it. And I remember right then there's a little knock at the door where my son says, Dad, can you make me breakfast? And I was just like, like, and I paused and I said, yes. And I knew in a moment, I was like, well, at least I can do this for my boys. And I began to get up and take care of my kids. And also I began to put on a mask of masculinity where I hid my emotions because I knew I had to be strong for all these people because my boys needed me. People at work needed me, family members that were grieving me. They needed a strong person. And I just put on this mask. And when people would ask how I'm doing, then I would just say, I'm okay. I'm doing fine. I could navigate getting people past me and avoid them asking the emotional questions that allowed me to start getting emotional. And I protected myself for 9 months. And I went back to therapy 9 days later after my wife's funeral. And again, I tried to find a purpose and tried to be the strong person so that I felt like I was doing something and feeling a need. And that mask just kept building energy over time. And there was a pivotal moment where I came home and my son looks at me, my 13-year-old son at the time, and goes, Dad, you come home angry every day. And Lauren, can you imagine just like your 13-year-old, like you're trying to do the best. And then my son could see the cracks in my mask. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking, gosh, I would so desperately like to just pour out my heart. but I was worried about them. And I was worried about how that would impact them. And so I just kept putting on this tough guy mask that for me, it wasn't fair. And that's not how you heal. Healing, what I've learned through this process is vulnerability invites vulnerability. Mm-hmm. And I got to a point where I took a lunch break, pulled out my phone, and I text 14 of my closest family and friends. And I just said, I'm not doing okay, guys. Can you come over to my house tonight? I just want to kind of let you in on how I'm feeling and what I'm struggling with. And I was like, I hope people show up to my house. What I found is people are wanting to help, but sometimes they don't know what to do or what to say. So they go into a support vacuum. And sometimes that's even worse, where they want to help, but they just disappear. So I show up to my house, people are coming in, and I'm in my living room in front of everybody. And I said, okay, the pain that I'm feeling inside is worse than the vulnerability of just taking off my mask and sharing. So I got to a crossroad where I was like, I'm just going for it. And I just poured out my heart and I just cried and I just wept with my family. And I just like looked around and I said, wow, I have in front of me my healing team that is here to help me through the process. And another thing I discovered was the opposite of grief, the opposite of depression is connection. And for me to reconnect with people that cared about me was a valuable healing process. So what we did in that moment, and I think this is good for everybody that goes for a traumatic and hard moment, is I made a captain of my team, and my captain was charged of checking in with me and was kind of help everybody else. But I remember letting my team know what I needed. And whether it be like the stressful things in my life were laundry or making dinners or taking care of the kids or checking in on me or mowing the lawn. But everybody in my team, they took one of those responsibilities off my plate. And then I remember I came up with a code word that all I had to do was text one word to my team captain, and then my team captain could send out help. And whenever it was so overwhelming or difficult or triggering or emotionally overwhelming, my team went into action and they took those stressors off. And I remember I didn't have to be the strongest person. I had people step in, take some of those stressors out until I became strong enough. And then I could take those back and then I could move through the process and I could get like the emotional strength to move through this process. And that became a way of life for me. And that's how I started to become healthy and happier again, because I wasn't, one, I didn't have my mask on. Mm-hmm. And then two, I wasn't trying to do everything. I am so grateful. I'm getting emotional, just humbled by that experience and the people that were there and the ability to just step in and just say, we're so happy to help you. It was liberating. And it was one of the pivotal moments of my life that I'll always be grateful for, that has altered my life forever.
Absolutely. There's just so much to unpack from you sharing so much of your story. And I feel like we'll probably start with the mask of masculinity. Just listening to your story, I was reminded of this quote that I heard from Jocko Willix, which is like, choose your heart, right? And in sharing your story, you were like, you know, the pain of the mask couldn't have been worse than the pain of expressing your need for help, your vulnerability, sharing the load. And so in that moment, you're like, okay, I'm going to choose a different heart. Like, this heart didn't work for me. And I feel like so many of our listeners who are on any page of their wellness journey, their healing journey, they continue to put on whatever the mask is, the mask of their career, the mask of being the hybrid parent, like you said, or these different roles that they've created expectations around. And to your point, it's like, once you choose a different heart, it opens you up for growth. And I think that there's just so much bravery in communication that is so overlooked in our society today. And I feel like you hit it on the head where you were like, I just created communication between my captain, and the captain would communicate. It almost like, as you were talking, I immediately thought of like a football team from my coaching background, where I was like, okay, like you've got the coach and you've got the players who all have their different roles. And then you've got, you know, the captain of the team, and there is a delineation and a delegation of roles on the team. And none of that can happen. Nobody can do their assigned role, their different part of a play, unless there's clear communication of responsibilities. And let's talk a little bit more on that. So when you reached out, you created this team of support. What do you feel like was the difference between having, because I would imagine some of our listeners get overwhelmed with like, well, I don't want to text all, 14 of my family members all on one text chain and then have everybody be paralyzed with like who's doing what and who's helping. So talk to me about how you came to the conclusion that having a captain be the liaison between you and your community of support would be the best route for you.
I think one thing to rewind just a bit is I was working in recovery, addiction recovery with clients, and we came up with a recovery team. And a recovery team works the same way, where whenever you're triggered or when you're about ready to relapse, you reach out to people to come wrap their arms around you and walk through that. So what I was teaching to people in recovery, I just adapted into how to help and how to get a healing team. So that's the ironic part, is I was teaching people and now I'm using what I was teaching people. And I was like, oh my gosh, this stuff actually works.
Yep. I was a teacher for 10 years, so I can firmly say that, yes, like there is so much learning from teaching others. But, and then it's very humbling.
I think what's also what I learned too is there's people that want to help. Mm-hmm. But the interesting thing is people need permission to come help you. And I know that sounds weird and odd, but people are waiting. And again, they don't know what to say or do until maybe you take off that mask and share what's really going on. And then they're like, okay, I have permission to ask Jason some emotional questions, or I have permission to ask him, hey, we have dinner for you tonight. And it doesn't seem so hard because I've given them permission to come into my circle to help them through that process. So I think that's really important, is you got to invite people into your life. And some people might not have 14 people. I think what's important to do is maybe identify a couple or at least one person. Because like I said, vulnerability invites vulnerability. And in order for us to get happier and healthy, there's got to be a way of being able to emotionally share how you're feeling and allow some of that pressure that you're feeling and have someone listen, have someone cry with, and release some of those emotions. And that's the way that you're able to get healthier. I tell people, lean into the discomfort, not to where you're overwhelmed, but lean into it just a little bit. And when it gets hard, you can step back and take a break for a couple days. But make sure you don't go back to that same place and you get comfortable, but go back to that same place and you lean just a little bit farther, and maybe you cry a little bit more with your person, your therapist, your friend, and it allows you to build up some emotional resilience. And that's how you get healthier. Getting healthier isn't, I can only go this far every time. It's a progression and a growth. So that's the advice I give people. Start with your therapist, start with just one person, and then expand out your team if you don't have your team already available to open up and help you through that.
Absolutely. It's so interesting because I know even with my work in my private practice with clients through health and wellness coaching, there is such an unvoiced expectation among especially Western culture and society that like you have to do everything alone. And if you don't, then you're unsuccessful or a failure, or there's this shame or guilt around, well, if you were this, then you would have been able to do that. And to your point, it's whatever process of your life or whatever chapter or stage that you're in, whether it's grief, whether it's navigating a diagnosis, whether it's making changes for your family, your own self, your health, whatever, it's an ever evolving process. It's not there's one spot and you've checked the box and then that's it. It just maintains. It is a constant evolution of growth and adaptation, and it's very cyclical and seasonal. And I think that it's just so profound to communicate. Something that you said really struck a chord with me, where it was like, you have to invite people and give them permission. I know that on like the opposite end of that, like so many people, they want to help, they want to be helpful, but they haven't been invited or they don't have permission. Yeah. What would you say to somebody who's on the flip side of that? They see a loved one who is in a stage of suffering or a challenging chapter in their life. Do you wait for the invitation or do you ask for permission? What does that look like from the opposite side?
I mean, part of it is your relationship. If you have a great relationship, I think that allows you to go in and ask those harder questions. But also, I remember attending church and I would just show up and I had my mask on. And again, people would come up and say, hey, if there's anything that I can do, let me know. And again, that puts pressure back on me that's grieving. And I can't tell you. But what I got really good at is the people that would just do the superficial answers. I got really good at just moving them on and just say, yeah, I'll let you know. I'm doing okay. But because I wasn't looking for someone to just be there superficial, I was looking for someone to sit with me in my emotions so I could pass them on. But when I had someone that would just sit with me, be consistent, and someone that would just say, how are you really doing, Jason? You don't look that well. And I was waiting for someone to just sit longer than a moment and just see right through me. And then I can give myself permission to open up because I wanted that kind of person in my life. So I think we got to be patient with people. But I think the consistency is if they don't respond, don't get worried, but be consistent. Maybe follow up in a couple days, maybe follow up in a day, but be consistent. So you're like, hey, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. And when they're ready, they're ready. But if you just throw it out and then you disappear, that doesn't help. So consistency, but ask them how they feel. Ask feeling questions.
Absolutely. Well, and I think just to your point, consistency compounds, right? Like you may not see results today. You may not see results in 2 weeks. It might not even be a year. But all of a sudden, something clicks, whether it's, weight loss, grief, support, something. That consistency has earned the invite. It sounds like what you're saying.
Ask questions that can be answered in more than a one-word answer or one breath.
Yes, absolutely. I know. It's like when you're checking out at the supermarket, it's like, how's your day going? Good. How's yours? Good. There's no actual exchange of like care, consideration, empathy. There's no energetic exchange other than a common courtesy of acknowledging their presence.
Yeah. I think for me is that I wanted the right people to help me. And I think that's important and doing therapy with clients, people want their person to listen to them and open up, but you have to be able to sit in those emotions with them and help them feel comfortable. So not everybody's ready to open up, but I think if you can be consistent and just help them ride and just listen, and people are ready. So that would be my advice, so that you can be that person and you can help them. And if they cry, then they cry. Sit in those emotions, and that will just help you through the process. And for someone that grieves or goes through hard times, people need someone on their side to just walk through that path with them. So it's not saying that you'll have all the answers, but it's just like, hey, I'm just going to be here no matter what. That means the world to people.
Absolutely. And I think too, just going back to this concept of cultivating your team, right? I always relate things to football, but it's like, I'm imagining like the offense and the defense, right? Like you're still a part of the same team. And just because you're not on the field at the same time doesn't mean that you're not supporting one another. And I think that for somebody who is trying to learn whatever process they're going through, those teammates are going to change. Just because you're not utilizing at the moment, you might down the road. And I think that that's really important to know. Yeah.
Yeah. I think one thing after this team that I created, I started to make some hard choices because I knew after a traumatic event, it's like your brain is on replay of that traumatic event and you rethink it and your body brings up those emotions. You rethink it and your body feels those emotions. Me and my boys were operating on sad and lonely memories of my wife's cancer and her dying. And I knew with my team now, I needed to create a new narrative for myself. And I needed to create happy and lasting memories so that we could be happier again. Because what we had that was replaying in our head wasn't making us happy. So after this meeting, I decided to quit my job. I made a bucket list for my boys at the dinner table, and we started making a list of things where we would involve people, because connection helps you get through that grief, and depression, it's the opposite of those. And we began to heal with different people and making fun and happy memories with my boys. And we went horseback riding, we went fishing, we went on an airplane, a little small airplane, with people that were in our circle. They asked us questions about us. We made memories with them, and we started to recreate our narrative of how we were beginning to live our lives. And I felt like I was reconnecting with my boys the way I wanted to. And it was really meaningful. And I think one of the things on that bucket list that has changed us is we said, we want to make a lemonade stand. So we made a lemonade stand, and the goal was we were going to make, and rewind, my wife was going through treatment. Someone brought over a yellow basket of fun sunshine stuff that cheered us up and made us happy. We wanted to do that. So we wanted to raise $100 at this lemonade stand, and we were going to make 2 of these baskets. And our goal is we were going to not focus on ourselves, but focus on someone else to heal. So we would go deliver these people and say, we're here for you. We love you. It's hard. But when the lemonade stand got done, we had $1,500 that we raised. And what we did with that, we began to make these baskets, and we threw it out on Facebook. And me and my boys would go and deliver these to people. And we would bring light and happiness and joy to them. And it became a way of healing for us because we weren't thinking about us. We're giving ourselves an emotional timeout to help people. And it was wonderful. I saw my boys being happier. I was starting to look forward to things. And I noticed too, as I was giving these away, as people across the country were saying, I want a basket too. So what we did is we started making boxes, and we began to ship them across the country to people that needed help and happiness. And this became our medicine of healing our wounded heart, helping other people, serving other people, and focusing on something that's bigger than us. And to this day, we have 45 states covered that have a sunshine box that we've been able to have an influence on people's life. And it just brings us so much joy that we're able to do that. And that specifically has been life altering. And I feel like my boys are happier and healthier. The light is back into my eyes because we took something so painful and turned it into something that could be purposeful and meaningful to be able to help people. And it's crazy to think that where we're at and how we're doing it has allowed so much happiness and people to heal. So that's what gets me excited all the time now, is just when people get a box and they're happier from it. So
I'm like getting emotional. It's like, it's almost so divinely serendipitous. when you think about it, it was like this yellow basket had such an impact on your family. And in this moment of trauma, as you're navigating this, you're cultivating support and you're creating this literal bucket list, and you have this bucket, and it's like, oh my gosh, like, let's take this moment to recognize that this was hard. This is grief. This is struggle. This is strife. This is challenge. And this trauma is a moment in time. And, you know, the time with their mother and your wife is more than just that moment. It is more than this one thing. And we need to transform and remember that it was so much more than that. And it's like, trauma is just this moment in time as opposed to the entire timeline. And not to take away from the strife and like what you had to endure during that moment of trauma, but you literally made lemonade from lemons in this like lemonade stand. And it's, you know, you really think about it and it's like, oh wow, like this has just such a profound effect. And I think that so many people, when they get on whatever their healing journey is, they are doing it, whether it's for other people, like in your case, showing up for your sons and trying to drop the mask of masculinity, cultivate joy and inspire and help them be the best young men that they could be and be there for your family. And I think that so many people, when they decide to make a change in their life, it usually is for other people. That's a completely relatable statement to think about. But along the way, ironically enough, we actually end inspiring those people to make changes in their own life and pay it forward. And I just think that that's just so incredibly healing and so incredibly beautiful. And so
I think one thing that has been helpful is, so when we put these original boxes together, these buckets, we were looking for yellow things. And here's the teaching point where I have to take a step back and really think how my boys got healthier. So before, our narrative was focusing on the negative. We were focusing on cancer and sadness and loneliness. And our brain got so used to finding that wherever we went, whether it be on Facebook, whether it be at school or a sporting event, we would just gravitate to the most negative person. And with the buckets is we began to look for specifically yellow things. And it changed the way we begin to focus. And we begin to focus on yellow things. And I remember I'd take my boys to the store and they said, hey, this would be awesome. Hey, we need to get this. And they begin to reprogram of focusing on something that's helpful or something that's brighter or something that's positive. And I believe therapy, and I didn't really realize this, but my boys were starting, and myself were beginning to program our narrative because we were focusing on something positive and uplifting and happy. And when I started doing that, it started to show up in my emotions and in my behaviors. And there's a psychology term called selective awareness. And we just begin to program our brains to focus on happiness. And that helped us create some momentum and happiness throughout the process. And what was amazing from that is these boxes, they have been fun and happy and cheering people up. But I took a step back, and with my biggest support, we thought, how can we help more people? So I've literally taken my background as a clinical therapist of helping people through trauma and grief and addictions. And we came up with like actual tools that help people through grief, to help people with diagnosis of cancer, depression, and anxiety. So we've created, the box has evolved into this box to be able to help you through the grief. Not just, hey, let's make you happy. It helps you through the process. And one thing in there is, we talked about earlier about nobody knows what to say or do. We made like a deck of support cards in this box that you give to people, and then they begin saying the right thing to the person.
Yes.
And it coaches them what to say. And then it becomes a better experience. And we start to learn how to help people grieve rather than just disappear. So it's constantly growing to be able to see how we can help more people and how we can just walk the path, and so no one has to suffer alone. I think that's what we want. Is we're a society, especially with the pandemic, is once we disconnected from everybody, and now we need to bring people back into our lives, and that's how we heal, is the power of connection.
I couldn't agree more. There is just so much strength in community, and it's the piece about mindset, I think, is just so important to reiterate with our listeners, where it's like your mindset is so powerful, and it literally holds the key to whatever you're going down. And at the same time, it's okay to be in that loneliness, be in that moment of grief, that moment of sadness, that strife, and be working to reprogram your mindset to focus on the things that you're trying to cultivate and call back. So there was something that you said around like focusing and reprogramming. And I think that if somebody's in the shit, right? Like right now where it's like, okay, I'm dealing with the aftermath of a traumatic event. I'm not in a place where I'm finding joy and happiness and spreading it to other people. And you were like, find the resources, right? Like you've created resources that help people communicate the things that they may not have the words for at the moment being. So I think find the resources if you can't by yourself, because not everyone's like, let me just have the bravery and the courage to communicate my needs and communicate my vulnerability, but find the resources that help you find the words. And then with working on mindset and focusing on reprogramming, in your story, you and your boys were looking for things that were specific to the cause, right? Like they were yellow, bright, different things. And it makes me almost think about in my own journey with therapy and different things. It's like a gratitude practice, right? Like what we focus on becomes our reality. So if we're looking for something, whether that's negative or positive, we will see more of it. So with looking for joy and happiness, one of the ways that you guys initially started was your bucket list. Is there something behind that where it was like, we're gonna look for joy in experience, or is that kind of unique to you and your boys?
Going back to you made a comment, some of my path has been divinely guided, and it takes me time where I was open to figure out what I needed to do. But what I did specifically is I had to shut off the noise and like not listen to my phone, wake up early, have this quiet moment. And I did my own, I guess, self-discovery. I call it my mindful meditation mindset. And I remember sitting at the table and I opened up my journal and I listened to just calming music, and I just wrote questions of how do I get healthy? How do I get happy? And as I just sat there and I just wrote, and I was just, I was just getting it out. And then I took a step back and I reread what was coming out, and being able to have that mindful, that quiet moment actually kind of inspired me, and my answers to what I needed to do came through those. And one of those was quit my job, create a bucket list, create happy memories. So for those, probably your listeners, is take a moment to just quiet the noise and just sit. And maybe you need to write down a question on top of the piece of paper and just write, or just let the quietness teach you what you need to do, because it is there. We just have to make a moment to get that. And many moments along my path have just pointed to that. And I always go back when I'm struggling or when I'm having a difficult time or I just feel off. I go back to that quietness and just go back to that process, because it's done a lot for me. And I think it's just turning it over to our higher power and just saying, okay, I can't do this alone. Where do I need to go, or what do I need to do next? Versus before it was, why are you taking this from me? And being angry, it's just like being more like fluid and just kind of just allowing the goodness to come through you and finding your path. And I think by doing this, I can honestly say that I'm grateful for what has happened to me. And the doctor that said cancer has a way of enhancing your life, it has. It's opened so many doors for me. I've been able to connect to so many amazing people. My life, my relationships have been deeply impacted because of the path that I've walked. And I think I didn't wait out grief. I had to go and do some hard things. And that allowed me to change through the process. And I sit here and I say, am I grateful that my wife passed away? No. But I'm grateful for the trial that has allowed me to become the person that I'm meant to become. And fast forward a little bit, and I don't get a chance to share this part, but this last January, because I was able to work on myself, I was able to find and marry my wife now, Kirsten, that has gone through her own trauma of losing her husband to cancer. And literally, we're able to help so many people because of the pain and the path that we've walked. And it becomes such a blessing that we get to be in that spot. And it's because we did the hard stuff, not because we waited out grief or we waited out the pain. You have to work on yourself, and you have to be willing to do some of those hard things in order for you to receive what you need to become or what you need to learn. Everywhere I go, it's not going to get better right away, but rather than just sitting and waiting, that's the worst thing. You got to get up and start doing some of those things that will help you become happier and healthier.
Absolutely. Again, I just constantly find myself getting emotional in our conversation. I just feel like there's so much truth behind what you've said, and it transcends grief, right? When we're talking about life and thriving and cultivating what is meant for you and living with purpose, I think that there's just so much truth and profound energy behind the statement of, like, you can't bypass pain. You can't. And I think that for our listeners who want to either just kind of like wait it out, or they're not taking that active participation in the challenge that they're faced with at the current moment, it just has to be something small. It does not have to be this huge, profound, jumbo life change where you move to a different country, or you decide to do all of these different things. It's like you said, like, it can just be something so small, like with you and your boys, where it's like, okay, we're going to look for these moments of brightness. We're just going to start with reprogramming what we're noticing in a day, or giving yourself the lack of distraction, giving yourself a moment of peace to just hear the inner knowing. I don't remember who said this, but there was somebody who stated something along the lines of, if you give the body half a chance, it will heal itself. And I think that can be true for a lot of different things that we face in our life, where if we can just give it the space it needs and remove the distractions that we can, right? Like, and just help learn from our own self-awareness and our own self-reflection, that to the point that you made about that profound moment with the doctor, there is some knowledge to enhance your life there.
I think just embracing your life can become so, you can turn your mess into your masterpiece. So, I mean, I sit back and I continue to see the blessings happen. And one blessing that I don't get to talk about very much, but my wife now, she's in her 40s. She was married to her previous husband for 4 years. She was never told she was going to have kids. And she was in a period of acceptance of, I will never have kids. That's okay. That's my role. Earlier this year, we found out that she is pregnant, and we're expecting to have this wonderful girl. that will be in our life. That's just amazing miracle. So it's really just think back when I was going through the worst time of my life. And I don't think we can look for and go like, my life's going to be so much better. But I think we need to be able to work and do some of those harder things because things will get better. Things just have to get better. But we need to do the hard things so that we can be in a position to really enjoy the great things.
Absolutely. Yes. You have to know challenge, grit, pain in order to truly appreciate and understand and acknowledge and notice what there is to be grateful for and those moments of joy. You're like, it's almost like you have to set your sliding scale, right? Where it's like, okay, now that I know like this is horrible, I really know that this is joyous and happiness. Yep. Got to cultivate that sliding scale.
It truly is.
Oh, congratulations to you and your wife and your boys. That is absolutely incredible. And you guys deserve nothing more than the world. And I think that to your point, it's like in that moment, in the lowest point of your life, and you're sitting there and you're asking the doctor, why? Like, give me answers. Tell me why this is happening. I mean, even if your future self could go back and be like, Jason, like, this is what I have planned for you in the future. Like, it's not going to matter. In that moment, you don't want to see it. You don't want to hear it. So yeah, it's perfectly okay to be at both. But to your point, your mindset has everything to do with it. Cultivating a team of support, because you shouldn't have to do it alone, whether it's experiencing these joyous moments or these horrific moments of trauma. You shouldn't have to do it alone, and cultivate your team. And it's so wonderful that you are giving back and helping others heal, not just in your profession, but with your company as well. That's absolutely incredible.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I love being able to share energy with people that are doing the same thing. So this has truly been a gift and a blessing to be here.
Absolutely. Jason, if our listeners want to connect with you, if they want to learn more about how to get involved with you and your cause, where can they find you on social and all of your different platforms?
So you can find us on givingsunshine.com. That's where our website is, where you can find those boxes that are available, where you can send them out or you can buy them for yourself. You can connect on Facebook on Giving Sunshine Daily, or Instagram, Giving Sunshine Daily. Or if you want to connect or need some support, my email is jason@givingsunshine.com. I'm happy to help and support with whatever you need to be able to help through this. So those are the best ways. So
awesome. Wonderful. And listeners, Sophia Health, we're here to help you guys build your team and cultivate all of the people that want to support you in your life. So Jason, thank you so much for sharing your story with us and holding space for us. This has been absolutely just such a profoundly wonderful episode. And I'm going to probably need a good cry, a little bit, but it's so good.
We all do.
Yes, we all need a little cortisol. Jason, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for listening. This has been Sophia Unfiltered, a podcast by Sophia Health. I'm your host, Lauren Deitch. If you're interested in connecting to wellness professionals that can offer one-on-one support, visit sophiahealth.com or connect with us, our community, and providers anytime on social. If this episode resonated with you at all, we'd love to hear about it in the comments section of your favorite podcast provider or with a 5-star rating. Let us know what your biggest takeaway was from the episode, or share it with someone you hope to inspire. Join us again next time for more real conversations, stories, and insights that help empower you with the knowledge and inspiration needed to transform the way we take care of ourselves.